A divided Supreme Court today upheld controversial Arizona voting restrictions, weighing in on a raging debate over voting rights. Now, the ruling appears to make it more difficult to challenge a growing number of state laws that restrict access to the ballot box. Here to weigh in on the ruling by the Supreme Court is Executive Director of the Black Voters Matter Fund, Cliff Albright. Cliff, welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining us on what may be a historic day. So what is your reaction to today's ruling?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Naira. I don't think it would be hyperbole or exaggeration to say that we're witnessing a decision today that in history could go down with the likes of Plessy versus Ferguson or some of the other post-Reconstruction era cases. I mean, I don't think that's an exaggeration, because what this has done is it's taken what the Supreme Court did, the same Roberts Court did 8 years ago with the Shelby decision, which gutted one part of the Voting Rights Act, and now it's gutted the remaining part of the Voting Rights Act, which really leaves the 1965 Act left as if just kind of an empty promise on paper. That's what the Supreme Court has done, and they've done so using language that goes back to some of those post-Reconstruction cases. I tweeted about this today, some of the actual language in terms of trying to argue that, well, it's not just race, it's not enough that, that black people or people of color are impacted. You have to really be able to show the intent, or that it was targeted based on race. That is literally some of the same language that we find in cases like the 1898 case dealing with Mississippi's Jim Crow Constitution. It's really just a historic moment that we're in right now.
Well, and I am sure that our children will be reading about this in law school and in history books. 6 of the justices said that the disparate racial impacts of voting rules are okay because the difference in, quote, employment, wealth, and education among race effectively don't matter anymore.
Yeah, and again, you could go back to that 1898 case where in that decision they said that, well, it's not race, it's things like being migratory or landless. Like some of the same issues literally of being landless, which deals with where do you live and how easy it is to have a particular address or to know where you go vote. It's literally the same issues that we're dealing with in this case. Again, finding any reason, any rationale that they can in order to say that this is really about something else other than race. It's the electoral version of like when police do a police shooting and they know that they can use the excuse of, I was afraid for my life. Now what we're seeing is as long as that you can argue that it's election administration and that it's not directly explicitly targeting race, that states will be able to get away with the same type of voter suppression that they did all throughout the Jim Crow era and that we've seen increasing over the past 8 years.
And it does put the balance of power on favor of elections officials who are appointed, and often partisan appointments, versus protecting the fundamental right to vote and making it easy for people to vote. So knowing that that is what the Supreme Court decided in Arizona, do we expect that that'll carry over to any challenges to the Texas and Georgia state-based legislation?
Yeah, that's the thing that we got to be on the lookout for is, are they going to interpret this in a way that deals strictly with this Arizona law, or has the benchmark that they've created, the new framework that they've created of basically saying that, you've got to be able to prove intent. In other words, that you'd have to have something like what we had in North Carolina in their gerrymandering case a couple of years ago, where there was actual documentation and computer files that showed that they were intending to discriminate on race. That short of a smoking gun, short of them being caught on tape saying, hey, we want to take away these voting rights for black people, that they can literally do just about anything and say that it's election administration, say that it deals with the state's right to regulate the time and place and manner of elections, and that they'd be able to get away with. They've really raised the bar. Whether or not they apply this across the board in every state or every case that comes after this Arizona case remains to be seen. But the language that Justice Alito, who wrote the majority opinion, used certainly looks like they're trying to create a whole new framework that they'll use moving forward.
Speaking of whole new frameworks, and you mentioned the historical context of Reconstruction of Jim Crow, how much of what we're hearing about how our children will be educated about race and diversity going forward connects to the Supreme Court decision today?
Yeah, just think about that. Like, we're in a time where they're trying to make it harder for you to teach about the history of Jim Crow, to teach about the history of Reconstruction, which has never been fully taught. I didn't really learn about the Reconstruction era until I got to college and almost grad school. But they're trying to make it even harder to teach this history at the same time that they're using some of these historical tactics in order to continue the voter suppression today. In other words, they don't want you to know the tricks that they used to do so that they can continue to do the same tricks today. And what they're also doing by making it harder to teach that history is that they're not allowing us to see the ways that we overcame those struggles, right? The way that we organized, the way that we had massive protests, the way that we had a Selma to Montgomery March. If you take all that out, then neither do you understand the problem, nor do you understand the solutions and the victories that we came up with. That's why they're attacking what they call critical race theory, but what they're really doing is just attacking any analysis of race in American history.
Well, you and your colleagues at the Black Voters Matter Fund definitely understand how we can not only leverage the tools of our ancestors, but bring them forward to defend the rights of the new generation. Thank you so much, Cliff, for joining us today.
Thank you.